The tension between East African neighbors Uganda and Rwanda continues to make news in the region. Over a week ago, the government of Rwanda blocked Ugandan cargo trucks from entering its territory at its border in Gatuna. Rwanda has also issued a travel advisory warning its citizens not to travel to Uganda. This weekend, President Paul Kagame addressed the tensions in public remarks while addressing a retreat of senior Rwandan officials. Mr. Kagame accused the Ugandan government of arresting and torturing its citizens.
There are people who have been in prison in their dozens, actually running into hundreds now. Some of them are in military prisons, others nobody knows where they are. Some have, and how did we come to know this? Almost every week there are people who are brought and dumped across the border.
The relationship between Uganda and Rwanda has seen its share of ups and downs, shifting from warm relations to disagreements over issues like the DRC and many others. But in the recent years, we have seen more warm relations between President Kagame and President Museveni, often visiting each other and working together to strengthen the East African community. However, this latest resurgence of hostility between the two neighbors has taken on new dimensions that include the use of social media by officials in both countries, trading accusations over platforms like Twitter. In his speech to senior leaders of his government, Mr. Kagame said that he had addressed the issues with his counterpart in Uganda, going as far as raising specific incidents of Rwandan citizens who had been arrested in Uganda.
We have evidence, and I have discussed it with my counterpart in Uganda. There are meetings we had in Addis Ababa, Hawaii Summit. We met twice on 2 days during the summit, directly. We're talking, and I raised this.
President Paul Kagame addressing a meeting with senior leaders of his government this past weekend. And to get a better understanding of Mr. Kagame's speech and the tension between these two neighbors, I reached Edmond Kajire, a Rwandan journalist and political analyst based in Kigali. Mr. Kajire tells me that even though both countries have previously addressed their differences, it was the first time that the Rwandan leader had gone to such great length and detail regarding this issue.
I think President Kagame for the first time went into details and highlighted some of the issues that have existed between the two countries, going on to say that actually the border situation at the moment, which is largely attributed to construction works going on at the border with Uganda at Gatuna, is not the actual issue happening between the two countries. And then he went on to say that the issues that have brought about this current situation go way back, and he has been having talks with his Ugandan counterpart.
Okay, and he articulated on some of that. We'll talk a little bit about that later on, but let's start with the border closure. Is the border between Rwanda and Uganda currently, as we speak, is that closed?
At the moment, I would say the borders are open, but I think what is happening is that Rwandans are not able to go to Uganda, but the borders are open because... for a fact, yesterday I picked some materials from the buses. They are moving from the ones from Kenya.
So there's traffic moving between Uganda and Rwanda.
There is.
What about the story that
on the side of Kagitumba?
Just to give our listeners a little bit of a context here, is there are two big border posts. There are other smaller ones, but there's one in Gatuna and there's one in Kagitumba. And last week, I believe was last week or the week before last, the border was closed. Ugandans who were transporting their goods through the Gatuna border post were told that their goods cannot go across. The reason for that, there was some sort of construction that was taking place.
The construction of the one-stop border post at Gatuna.
Now, is that complete? Are the trucks able to move freely now?
From what I was told yesterday, trucks and buses have resumed. Trucks are not able to go through Gatuna. They have been told to go back to Kagitumba, which is on the other side they have to go back to
that's the other border.
Then take the Miramari Road, then come through Kajitumba. So, from my understanding, some businessmen have been saying that it's going to cause them losses, and there's been a lot of traffic at Gatuna of trucks waiting maybe to be allowed to go through. But cargo traffic is coming through Kajitumba and Chanika, but at the moment, I think only buses are able to go through Gatuna.
The buses carrying passengers from Rwanda and Uganda.
Yes, from President Kagame's speech yesterday, we understand that the issue is going to be resolved and goods and trucks will be moving, as usual. But what remains to be resolved are the issues that Rwanda has raised to Uganda.
Okay, so what are some of those issues? And these are some of the specific issues that President Kagame addressed in his meeting with his senior government leaders at the retreat. What are some of the accusations from Rwanda about what Uganda is doing?
For the first time, he spoke deeply about the situation, and he said the biggest issue regards free movement of people. He says hundreds of Rwandans go to Uganda and they are harassed, they are arrested, some of them deported across the border, while others have been in jail, some for as many as 2 years. He did mention one, Venezuela Gungira, a Rwandan, I think he's a former soldier, was arrested in Uganda and accused of carrying out espionage acts. And President Kagame said he discussed this matter with his Ugandan counterpart, particularly the case of Mr. Rutagungira, and he said that he did provide some facts to President Museveni, and the Ugandan president had promised to take action or look into the matter, but it never happened. He said he did address the issues to him in a number of meetings, and then he went on to talk about the presence of the opposition group, Rwanda National Congress, in Uganda. He did mention several times that they are recruiting in Uganda, and the people who are targeted or are arrested either refuse to be recruited or refuse to be part of the activities that are happening in Uganda, which are aimed at destabilizing Rwanda. That's what President Kagame said.
Edmond, the spokesperson of the Ugandan government, Mr. Ofono Opondo, recently addressed the issue in the media. Mr. Ofono denied that Rwandans were being held for political reasons, saying that if there were any Rwandans in Ugandan prisons, they had been processed through the political and judicial system. Let's listen to him and then we'll continue our conversation.
The government of Uganda would like to make it abundantly clear once more for those who have ears. It has no issues with the government of Rwanda or with the people of Rwanda, with the people of Rwanda in Rwanda or the people of Rwanda in Uganda. Secondly, any matters are rising or being raised by the government of Rwanda, we have established channels, which is our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Diplomatic Services, through which we respond. I want to reiterate that in all the previous engagement, the government of Uganda has been cooperative.
That was Ugandan government spokesperson Mr. Ofono Opondo recently addressing the media on this issue of the tensions between Rwanda and Uganda. So, Edmond, this is not the first time that we have seen tensions between these two East African community members. Do you know if there is a mechanism within the organization, the ESC, on how to address or mediate such conflict between member states?
Currently, apart from the summit, we haven't seen any other effort between the countries. We saw President Kagame in Tanzania last week, and I think it was more to do with relations with Tanzania, not as part of the East African community. But so far, we haven't seen any effort, whether it's from Kenya or Tanzania or any other country, to try and and intervene in this current situation between Rwanda and Uganda. For the moment, some say maybe the AU should take charge and try to mediate the situation between the two countries and all the other East African countries. Because as it happens, we are seeing issues between Rwanda and Uganda, issues between Burundi and Rwanda, and some issues between Kenya and Tanzania. It's a number of differences between the countries, and it will take maybe external mediation for this situation to be resolved.
Edmond Kajire is a Rwandan journalist and political analyst. I reached him in Kigali, Rwanda. Meanwhile, the East African Legislative Assembly has called on Uganda and Rwanda to resolve peacefully the current tension between the two countries. From Burundi's capital, Bujumbura, Moses Havyarimana brings us this story.
After Rwandans were restricted to travel to Uganda, trucks halted at the Gatuna border between Uganda and Rwanda. The East African Legislative Assembly has called on the two countries to resolve the current crisis peacefully in order to allow the free movement of goods and persons as provided in the East African Community Common Market Protocol, to which both countries are members. George Odong is a member of the Regional Assembly from Uganda.
We as an assembly would like to amplify the voices of East Africans to call upon our partner states to restrain themselves as much as possible and to be guided by the provisions of our treaty that all manner of conflicts are not beyond our reach. We have institutions, we have a leadership that is capable of resolving those issues peacefully.
Kigali says that the Rwandan citizens were regularly arrested, tortured and held incommunicado in jails of chieftaincy of military intelligence in Uganda, and that some security forces in Uganda have been supporting the Rwandan National Congress of Kayumba Nyamwasa, who closely collaborate with the FDLR rebels accused of committing the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Aden Abdikadir is a lawmaker from Kenya.
Even if it means challenging the status quo in our countries, the rest of you should not sit around and watch us in our disagreement if you are true friends and you care for each other, including diplomatic standoffs, which sometimes I wonder, where is the intervention of the others? Otherwise, diplomatic engagements and disagreements that only requires to grab the hands of these two friends and say, guys, what's going on here? And it will be resolved.
For recently, the East African community has failed to resolve the challenges and the differences between member states, with the Burundi and Rwanda relations still yet to be addressed by the community. Moses Havyarimana, VOA Africa, Zanzibar.
In the midst of growing tensions between East African community neighbors Rwanda and Uganda, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta met separately with the leaders of the two countries. Kenyatta was in Rwanda yesterday, where he met with President Kagame. He later traveled to Uganda, where he met with Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni. The purpose of Kenyatta's brief visit remains unclear, but there is speculation that he might be playing an intermediary role, trying to broker some form of talks between the two neighbors. Experts say that any conflict between Uganda and Rwanda would certainly be felt in Kenya, which is a route for Rwanda's exports and imports to and from Kenya's port of Mombasa. Mwambutsa Ndebesa is a renowned professor of history and political economy at Uganda's old university, Makerere.
On the economic front, of course, the two countries depend on each other in terms of exchange of goods. Import goods from outside Africa to Rwanda pass through Uganda. So it will affect the import route to Rwanda, and the communities in Rwanda are going to suffer, besides the business people who have been plying between the two countries. And this can even impact on the GDP of the two countries. Uganda could lose a market of Rwanda, and Rwanda loses a market for Uganda, but even the citizens could lose the goods and services that they have been getting from each other's countries. So citizens will be on the losing end just because their politicians and rulers do not agree with each other on matters of good governance and principles.
Professor Ndebesa also says that a conflict between the two countries would have an adverse effect on the citizens on both sides of the border. Many share a common heritage and have traded with each other since pre-colonial times.
The colonial boundaries and borders cut across ethnic groups in Uganda. So you find some Ugandans in, say, Kisoro, who are ethnic Banyarwanda in Uganda, and then they have ethnic Banyarwanda across the border. These are people who are interdependent on each other, and they live a harmonious living, socially and otherwise.
That was Professor Mngambutsa Ndebesa, a renowned scholar of history and political economy at Uganda's oldest university, Makerere.